just living the dream under this southern sky. It's where stories are born and legends never die.
I'm Johnny Ponder. Welcome to GI Legends Tales of Trails. And today my very special guest, which is a very special guest, and one of the ones I've really been looking forward to, is Mr. Jonathan Stober with the U.S. Forest Service, and you are a wildlife biologist, right?
I have been a wildlife biologist in a past life. I'm a fire ecologist right now.
Okay, so are you considered the FMO?
No, I am not an FMO.
All right. But you still handle the Golden Eagle Project.
Yes, I do.
Okay, that's one thing that I wanted to ask you about. Before you started doing that, I didn't even know there were golden eagles in this area.
That's correct. Within Alabama, there had been a very few observations of golden eagles. Within Alabama, within northern Alabama in particular, there was a record in 1908, but there really was no understanding the extent of golden eagles that come here in the wintertime in northern Alabama.
Now, do they just winter here and then they nest up north?
That's right. They winter here. So right around Halloween, Thanksgiving, they're migrating from Canada, and they're coming down two migratory pathways, one down through Appalachia, one down through central Michigan, or one through western Superior, west of Lake Superior. And so those three different migratory pathways is about a 1,500-mile stretch up to Canada where they breed, starting in April, May, June, and then they kind of hang out in Canada for a while and eat and take life in, and then come fall, they migrate down those migratory pathways into Alabama where they spend the winter.
What, do their offspring come with them?
Yes. We don't know that they're all, that they migrate together necessarily. We've never been able to document and record that, but we're kind of getting closer to the idea that pairs do that.
Well, it looks like to me the young wouldn't be old enough to stay there by themselves.
Well, they don't stay by themselves. They go on their own wander.
Okay.
Juvenile birds have different migratory pathways and ways of seeking out the world, just as a young teenager does. They usually go on a larger ramble versus a breeding adult has a knowledge of the landscape of the continent, so to speak. And so they will migrate up and down the pathway that they establish. But a young bird may be late getting into the south or might not migrate as far south, because really these are cold weather adapted birds, in that they can handle climate extremes, not so much heat, but they can experience some extreme cold. And they also need topography, because they are really big birds, and what they require is that orographic lift, so to speak, where you have air movement across ridge systems that allows a big bird, like a 13-pound bird, to get up and soar.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have a place here on the Shoal Creek National Forest where it's kind of a gathering place for them. Possibly. You hope, anyway, right?
Yes.
And so y'all set up and try to do some video of them and that kind of stuff, and I'd love to do that myself.
Well, wouldn't necessarily recommend doing it yourself.
Oh.
But the technique is, back in about 2010, we really still were in the dark as to how many golden eagles were in this eastern population. There's a lot of golden eagles, like 20, 30,000 golden eagles in the west, because it's a very suitable habitat for them to eat jackrabbits and such. In the east, we really didn't have that knowledge, and so in about 2010, 12, we started putting out bait stations, and those bait stations are basically roadkill whitetails. Is the preferred food source. And we place those out in a woodland opening. We put a game camera on it, and then we just basically provision that site and monitor that game camera through time. And so what we see typically, if that site is appropriately placed, like those golden eagles, they come in October, November, they hang around a bait site. Sometimes once they lock into a bait site and that's really consistently provisioned, they'll just hold right there. and they will eat, and then they'll go sit and digest and just sort of have a relaxing uh, winter in the South.
I can kind of identify with
You
that,
can?
can't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now, and you had told me once before, which was absolutely astonishing to me, that a lot of the problems you have with the eagles are actually eating the lead out of deer that have been shot,
Yes.
and the hunters didn't find
Yeah.
them. And I couldn't believe there would be that much lead.
There is actually, that is the leading cause of death within eagles in the eastern part of their range here. As some may know, in the West, electrocution is probably the highest means of mortality
Yeah.
for eagles there. But in the East, it's really been found that lead levels in eagles are often elevated. And the reason for that being is that there's a lot of hunters in the landscape, and whether they recover the deer or not, they can field dress that deer. And what happens when a lead bullet goes into a carcass is it literally shatters into
Right.
micro fragments all over the place. And there's some videos online that you can see of golden eagles eating. And when they get down to business, they're really quick to provision themselves and fill their gizzard up full of meat. You know, they're really working hard, and so they're not really discriminating upon what they're
Right.
putting into their bill. And so that lead accumulates in their system. If they're provisioning themselves off of gut piles or unrecovered deer, the likelihood of them getting elevated lead is very common. Actually, the first golden eagle we caught here, Pinhoti, back in 2012, I believe it was, had extremely high lead levels. And what we do in the field is that two folks, Mike Lanzone and Trish, come down, and they have the permits to capture eagles, and they take a blood draw on that eagle when they're working it up, and there's a device that allows you to assess the lead level. And so Pinhoti was found to have an elevated lead level, and we took that bird to the Raptor Center at Auburn, and they were very happy to receive her, of course, because they're all about war
Yes.
eagles.
Yeah.
And so what the ketosis that you go through for reducing lead levels is you're really trying to provision that bird with clean food to cycle that lead out of the system. And so there was about 2 weeks lapsed, and Auburn wasn't really ambitious about giving the bird back to us, but we went down there and we retrieved the bird and let Pinhoti go. And her lead levels had recovered, and she then went on to migrate a couple different times to and from Canada.
So you got a radio on her, a radio collar on her.
It was, yeah, what we do is when we capture a bird and we work them up to figure out their age, sex, molt, blood lead levels, we then outfit them with a photovoltaic, so a solar panel with a cellular transmitter. So a cell phone with a solar panel, basically, is what it is. And that sits in between their shoulders. And what that does is it allows us to track that bird as it migrates, and gives us all sorts of data about temperature, altitude, the activity of that battery, the activity of that bird as it migrates to and from Canada.
Well, that's just. And how many birds have you captured and put cameras on?
So we've been able to capture 8 birds here on the Shoal Creek, which is more than I think any other place in Alabama, and more than probably outside of Virginia and Tennessee, more than any place in the Deep South. And of those 8 birds, they've been broken between males and females, mostly all adults. There's been a couple juvenile birds. But they've allowed us to add our data into a greater program of work, which has looked at probably over hundreds of birds now and their migration pathways from the southeast up into Canada and back and forth. And that data is really important because it allows us to really see how these birds are utilizing the landscape. And then it gives us the opportunity to mitigate risk, whether it's a wind farm or towers or what have you, in order to allow those populations to flourish.
Well, that was another question I was going to ask you about these turbine fields of windmills, as you say. Is that a danger to them too?
It can be. I don't know how many of your viewers have ever been blindsided, but that's essentially what happens. You're going along on a trajectory and something comes out of your blind sight and
Yeah.
can hit you very easily. I won't say that, towers, whether they're phone towers, cellular towers, wind farms, or windmills, yeah, they're an obstacle to anything, whether it's a bird, a bat, what have you. But they are also a sustainable energy source that we can manage differently. There are ways that we can manage those wind farms and those towers. We put lights on towers. We can stop wind farms at certain migration points when birds are moving through. And so that's one of the things that folks have been looking at, is how the timing of that migration through landscapes, and then how you can manage that interaction.
So they would actually cut them off or lock them where
Yes,
they can't turn?
right. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's good. Now, these eagles, now, for your information, let me tell you that Jonathan has worked with our schools. Our kids have worked on these Golden Eagle projects. I think that Kim even helped you raise some money to buy another collar or something one time.
Mm-hmm.
And so our kids are getting involved in this, and they already know more than I knew. I kind of came in here blind myself, but I knew Jonathan would be the man to talk to. So, other than that, I know you're doing some RCW work up there too.
Yes, sir.
Are you involved with that?
I have been involved with that. Our population is increasing incrementally through time. We're up to somewhere in the mid 40s with potential breeding groups.
Good deal.
Our long-term goal is to have over 100 potential breeding groups here on the Shoal Creek, and we'll meet our recovery goal with that. But that requires a lot of burning and a lot of timber management for us to get the suitable habitat for those birds.
Are you doing a lot of longleaf?
Yes, sir. Longleaf, but as well shortleaf as well.
Okay.
There's a intergrade here on the Shoal Creek between longleaf and shortleaf, and some of those different sized fire sheds. So there's, doing a lot of pine.
Yeah, we're
pine
kind of
work.
on that line between the longleaf and the shortleaf.
Mm-hmm.
I had a guy ask me, and you know him, he used to work with the Forest Service, John Stober.
Mm-hmm.
John asked me one time if I was going to grow pine for grade, what species would I grow? And I immediately said shortleaf.
Yes.
And he said, "Oh no, you can't grow Well, you can grow shortleaf.
Yes, you can.
Yeah." And you know what else I heard? I was fooling around up in the Mark Twain some, where they have a lot of shortleaf.
Yes, sir.
And the guy told me up there they even did some stump regeneration projects from longleaf, which is the only, shortleaf, which is the only tree that will stump regenerate.
Correct. Yep.
And I don't know about the quality of it, but we bought 8,800 acres in southern Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in and around that Current River National Scenic Riverway, or whatever they call it. And those logs, we cut them 18 foot and carried them down into Arkansas and put them on rail cars. And you'd get a rail car load. I could tell a rail car load of that wood as far as I could see it, because you couldn't tell the little end from the big end of those trees.
That's right. And the knot structure on those bowls is much smaller.
Yeah.
So I've often thought that shortleaf has been high, was high graded really in a lot of our systems, because when you look at a longleaf, particularly open grown longleaf, you get really big branches and heavy limbs on it, and a lot often cleaner. It all depends on your fire regime though.
Yeah. How does that affect the flat tops of them? You see a lot of old longleaf, it's real flat topped.
Yeah, it's just sort of that site index where the terminal growth is ended. And so, it's one of those factors of being able to be a 200, 300-year-old tree.
Yeah.
And you can't grow much taller, and so you just grow fatter.
Yeah.
And so that's
the way I've been doing it.
How you think about I think about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of reached my height level too.
You just get a certain height, and then you just get rounder, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. Well, tell us something else that's going on with Shoal Creek.
Something else that's going on with the Shoal Creek. Well, we did a lot of bat work back when we had our bats here in 2013, 14, 15, and 16. And then we had white nose syndrome come through, and it really reduced the population of our Indiana and northern long-ear bats, really tanked those populations. And so when we were doing that, we were really being leaders in understanding how bats use this system. And really, the bottom line of what we found was that bats really like fire. And the reason bats like fire is because they also like the bugs.
Yeah.
And so you get a fire moving through a system, prescribed fire or wildfire, but hopefully a prescribed fire. What it does is regenerate that system, and it also regenerates that insect community, which then becomes an attractant to bats,
Right.
because what they're foraging on is flies and beetles and mosquitoes and all those sort of different flying insects. And that new green growth and that vegetation turnover that's spawned by fire is really beneficial for bat populations.
I can remember my grandpa telling me that turkeys liked parched acorns.
Yes.
And get out in a place where they, and you know, Jonathan, I've killed turkeys in the spring before, and you could smell the burned feathers on them.
Yes.
Where they'd already...
they are definitely firebirds, because they also will go, and after a fire, they'll go across there and they'll hawk up all the dead bugs that are they're there that have been cooked, like your acorns that your grandfathers said.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things that goes into wildlife management and timber management, of course, and most of them benefit the other one. It's kind of like each one of them is a keystone species, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And they go along together. Fire is one thing that I firmly believe in, and I'll tell Forest Service people, don't run out of matches. Let me know. I'll bring you some. Yeah, let's go to striking them. But
That's right.
I'm a real fan of this warm season burning too, and I know it's kind of controversial. A lot of people.
I don't know if you really look at the numbers of it. We do a lot of our firework in February, March, and some of April, but then we really tail off. And when you look at the percentages of acres that are treated in that turkey season, if you want to call it that, or after that in May and June, it really drops in below 10% usually, or less. Right. And so when you're talking about a landscape, you're really not impacting that great of an extent. And in doing that treatment in that time of year, what you're doing is you're really hitting the carbohydrate load on those hardwood trees that we're not so favorable towards. And I'm not speaking of oaks. I'm speaking of the mesic species like your sourwood, your sweet gum, your black gum. That spectrum of species that is fire resistant really explodes when you move into just solely a dormant season burning regime. And so mixing it up really helps broaden the diversity of your understory and controlling your woody species that are in that.
Where'd you go to school from?
University of Georgia.
Okay. In spite of that.
All right.
No, there was a wildlife professor at Auburn, Lee Striblin, I don't know if you remember.
Yes.
He told me one time that if you really want to look at it the way it really is, the closer to the ground your diversity is, the healthier your forest is.
That's correct.
And that makes a lot of sense,
right.
Especially the reasoning behind the burning that all y'all do,
right.
because that exposes dirt to sunlight and you get all the natural gas, grasses growing. A good example of that kind of management is down on the highlands where they're doing all that real heavy long leaf.
Yes.
Have you seen some of those areas where it's almost like a shelter wood cut, and the reproduction under those things
is
are unbelievable?
Yes. It's a real strange gradient when you go from the coast up to here, where seedling recruitment of longleaf in particular is really episodic and not consistent. And as you get into these clay soils and you move interior, your reproduction by longleaf, and then if you get that exposed soil, you can have a literal carpet of regeneration of longleaf is what I've seen. And so it's, that's a climatic shift that the tree is responding to, right, over time.
That's right. Yeah, and it wasn't Walter Bartram, it was John Bartram, I think. When he came over here after DeSoto did and walked through this area, came through this area, he wrote about the vast savannas of longleaf pine. He said man could ride 8 horses abreast through the vast pine savannas. And I tell everybody, show me a place on Cheehaw where you can ride 8 horses that's not paved.
That's right.
There's not.
It's very difficult. And if you go back in time and look at any pictures, You know, the reason why that landscape looked like that was because the Native Americans were managing it that way. It was, you know, yes, there were lightning strikes, but Native Americans were here. They were trying to survive on a landscape, and they knew that if they burned places, that they were going to have more game, more berries, more resources that they were going to be able to feed themselves with. And so we found alternative means of feeding ourselves, right?
Yes.
We've gone towards intensive agriculture of whatever
Walmart.
shape. Yes, or Walmart. And so by doing that and then really losing our fire culture, we've allowed forests to really overgrow themselves.
Yes.
And that's why you have southern pine beetle problems. That's why we can't ride 8 abreast through any place. And not that everything needs to be a savanna, because it doesn't, but in this part of the world, it would have been much more of a woodland that would taper to a savanna, that would taper to some north slopes that would be really dense. Because fire was the major tool that was manipulating the composition of where those species distributed themselves.
Not to mention we have so many interferences now with what few wildfires we do have.
Yes.
You know, you got roads, power lines, cities, sporting complexes. I mean, I think it would scare most people if they knew just how many acres are taken out of production for sporting events. Golf courses.
Yes, I would say that would be scary. And it's also scary if you really know what fuel is. Mm-hmm. You see it everywhere you go, and you think about another drought event, what it could be if that drought event is ignited, so to speak.
Well, a little evidence of what we're talking about is a few years ago, we had a real bad fire. It was the same weekend or the same nights that Gatlinburg got burned up.
Yeah.
Now, Gatlinburg is next to the Smoky Mountain National Park. Mm-hmm. They've done absolutely no fire management on those places, and the fuel was waist deep. Mm-hmm. When those catch on fire, you have a drought, and then they catch on fire, it's almost unstoppable. You can't stop.
That's right. And what the natives did is they fireproofed their landscape, right? Yeah. Because they were using fire on a regular basis. They had no Smokey the Bear. They had no way of putting anything out. And so they fireproofed themselves by utilizing fire as a tool.
And had the Forest Service not done so much pea burning in the months before that fire, and it hadn't come that little rain right at midnight.
That's right.
We'd have lost some houses on the McIntosh Road.
That's correct.
Because it was headed that way. Mm-hmm. It sure was. Yeah. But they slowed it down with their fire management program, and all of you need to be really thankful for that. And we're going to do a podcast with your FMO as soon as we can line them up. And I want him to explain why you get up like in March and early April and you smell smoke. Mm-hmm. You need to know why you're smelling that smoke and the reasoning behind it. And I think most everybody will understand why you're doing it.
Yes.
It's one of the best things and the cheapest.
It's the best and the cheapest thing we can do to protect property and life, as well as enhance ecological condition for all the different unique critters that live on this landscape.
Wildlife love it.
That's right.
Generally, if you have a real pretty forest with a lot of old growth pine and hardwood in it, and it's just as pretty as it can be under it. And you may see some turkeys or deer run through there, but there's one thing you can be assured of. They're all visitors. They just passing through, going somewhere else. Because a wildlife is going to be where the food sources is and where it's healthier for them to live.
Yeah.
Jonathan, thank you very much for doing this little quick podcast with me.
You bet.
And I'm sure I got a lot of listeners that said they really love to talk about stuff like this. And,
I appreciate the opportunity, Johnny.
And let me give you an invitation. If you come up with something else that the Forest Service needs to get the word out, you let me know. We'll do another one.
All right. Sounds good.
Any is your choice.
All right.
Non-controversial. All right. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, sir.
To Munford, our home, and all its glory on display, and to the Cheehaw legends that'll never fade away.